One of the best things about Pokémon is the super fascinating idea of discovering a new Pokémon that you've never seen before. And while most of the time this comes in the form of the Pokémon Company simply introducing new Pokémon every couple of years, if you do enough digging, you can actually find some Pokémon within the franchise itself that we have never seen before either. And these are the ones, in my opinion, that are especially interesting. And with that in mind, in today's video, we are going to be looking at 5 obscure forms of Pokémon that you might not know about. These are ones that are buried deep within the lore of the Pokémon series, or buried deep within its history and are on the more weird side of things that you might have just missed for whatever reason. These are all really cool and interesting and strange, and I am really excited to talk about them, so let's go ahead and get into it. Just to let you guys know before we get into the video, I am possibly going to be doing a Pokemon Scarlet and Violet giveaway. If we can get enough new listeners on my Spotify by the time the games come out, I am going to be giving away a copy of those games once they release. And I also just released a brand new remix onto Spotify, as well as pretty much every other major music streaming service. It's a remix of the bike theme from Pokemon Red and Blue, and I'm going to be releasing a few more remixes throughout the next little while as well. So if you haven't yet, check out my Spotify, listen to some tunes, support the channel because it absolutely hugely supports the channel, and maybe you'll even win a free copy of Scarlet and Violet at the same time. It's very, very much appreciated, and I would love to be able to give away some games, so consider checking that out if you're able to. And now, on to the video. The first one I wanted to talk about today is a secret form of the Pokemon Gastrodon. Now, Gastrodon is a Pokemon that already has multiple forms in its West Sea and East Sea variations. However, according to the Pokédex, there is actually an additional canonical form of Gastrodon that we have not got the chance to see. According to the Pokédex, it apparently had a huge shell for protection in ancient times. And, long ago, its entire back was shielded with a sturdy shell. There are traces of it left in its cells. Given that this is a pretty distinctive difference to the Gastrodon that we know in the modern day, this is a pretty fascinating revelation, and it would be really cool to be able to see this shelled form of Gastrodon actually appear in a game someday. And if that did actually ever happen, this is what it might look like. This particular piece of fan art showcases Gastrodon with a shell just like it is stated to have had in its Pokédex entries, and ultimately, this shelled form of Gastrodon is a really good example of just how cool the lore of the Pokemon world can be, and especially its Pokédex entries, when you take the time to study it a little bit. And while I'm not exactly sure if we will ever get to see this form of Gastrodon ourselves, just knowing it exists there as a facet of the Pokemon world and its history is pretty cool in my opinion. Next up, we're going to look at a Pokemon form that does not actually appear within the main series of games. At least it hasn't yet anyway, because it features primarily instead within the TCG. And that would be none other than light Pokemon. You've probably heard a lot about shadow Pokemon, or maybe even dark Pokemon who also appear in the TCG, but if you're not a TCG aficionado, then light Pokemon might be something that is new to you, because they are definitely talked about a lot less than their more popular dark counterparts, it seems. The other thing that makes light Pokemon particularly obscure is the fact that their only appearance to this point was within the Neo Destiny expansion of the trading card game, which came out over 20 years ago in 2001. There isn't really any visual differences with these Pokemon compared to their regular counterparts, but they do tend to have higher HP stats, as well as having moves that help and support other Pokemon due to their light nature. There are 21 light Pokémon that have appeared in the TCG so far, with 20 of them coming from the Neo Destiny expansion. The 21st would randomly come out about 20 years later in the form of Light Toxtricity as a promo card, which is a really odd inclusion given the antiquated nature of this form of Pokémon. Light Pokémon are definitely one of the more under the radar and forgotten about forms of Pokémon that have ever existed. But it is interesting to note that a lot of the stuff in the main series Pokémon games was actually originally featured in the TCG, so who knows? Maybe Light Pokémon will eventually become one of those things and they'll actually get the spotlight in an official main series game someday. And speaking of the main series games, we're going to go back to them for this next entry and take a look at none other than Arceus. While Arceus, despite receiving its own titular game in Pokemon Legends Arceus earlier this year, did not and has not received any additional forms that we have seen for ourselves. However, just like we learned with Gastrodon, that's not to say that it doesn't have any additional forms, because it was heavily implied and pretty much confirmed in Pokemon Legends Arceus that Arceus does indeed have an additional form of some kind that is more or less the true form of the Pokemon. And this form is referenced by none other than Arceus itself. At the very end of the game, after you defeat it in battle, you don't actually get to catch it in the traditional way, and instead, Arceus allows you to use it in battle. However, you're not just catching God in the same quirky way that a lot of people like to point out when it comes to Arceus, but instead, Arceus tells you that it will allow you to take a piece of itself with you in order to give you access to its power and for it to see the world through your eyes. And therefore, the Arceus that you get to use in the game from that point forward is this piece that it referred to, but at the same time, it is the Arceus that we all know and love, which ultimately means that the Arceus that we know and love is not actually the true form of Arceus, and instead is just a piece. That would explain why you as the player are able to capture it, because you're not really capturing it, it is just giving you a piece of itself to use, and it also means that there is a true, complete form of Arceus out there with all of its pieces put together that we have not seen to this point. And given that Arceus is literally God, I don't expect we're going to see this anytime soon either, because this form is probably so magnificent and godlike that we as humans probably can't even comprehend it, let alone catch it in a Pokeball. And while we will probably never get to see this form of Arceus for ourselves, just to know that it is actually out there and there is a true form of Arceus that does exist is entirely fascinating enough on its own. So I'm really glad that they decided to sneak this little detail into Legends Arceus, because it honestly makes Arceus all the cooler. So remember how I mentioned that a lot of stuff from the TCG is eventually used in the main series games? Well, while that hasn't happened for Light Pokemon yet, it does seem to have happened for this next form of Pokemon, and that would be Crystal Pokemon. This is another one from the TCG, and just like Light Pokemon, this is another one that really hasn't been around or relevant for a really long time, only ever featuring in the Aquapolis and Sky Ridge expansions, which date back to about 20 years ago in the early 2000s. So once again, if you're not really into the TCG, there's a good chance you might have not have ever heard about Crystal Pokemon, but thanks to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you're about to get a lot more familiar with them, because it's very, very possible that Crystal Pokemon helped to inspire Terrestrial Pokemon from the new Gen 9 games, because not only do they have the Crystal thing both going for them, but another interesting thing about Crystal Pokemon from the TCG is that they are able to change their types, just like some Pokemon also do once they terrestrialize. So these two are definitely connected in some way behind the scenes, and honestly, it kinda does make you think a little bit more about whether light Pokemon that we talked about earlier could actually make a legitimate appearance in some way in a future Pokemon game, which is really exciting to think about. The other thing that is noteworthy about Crystal Pokemon is that in addition to them being able to change their types, they all start as the colorless type initially, which is basically the TCG's equivalent to the normal type, more or less. In fact, though, if it wasn't for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Crystal Pokemon would be a heck of a lot more obscure than they ultimately are now, thanks to them effectively being brought into the main series games. But nevertheless, you could have missed them really easy if you weren't a TCG person about 20 years ago. So if you never knew that these guys existed before, be sure to let me know with a comment below. For our 5th entry on this list, we've got a pretty interesting one, because it actually has to do with a second form of shiny Pokemon. Shiny Pokemon are probably the most well-known form of Pokemon that are out there, so it's kind of ironic to have a second shiny form on an obscure list like this, but the reason why they are obscure is because they are indeed a second form of shiny Pokemon that some Pokemon have. However, they don't have it within the main series games. And that is because these interesting second forms of shiny Pokemon appear within Pokemon Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, and only apply to certain Pokemon because some of the shinies from those games are indeed the shinies that we know these Pokemon to have. So it seems like this is ultimately an error on the part of the developers, and they simply gave these Pokemon the wrong shiny forms. That does indeed seem to be the case with certain Pokemon like Heracross or Metagross that do indeed have differences to their standard shiny forms, but it's only a subtle difference. However, there are also Pokemon that have shinies that are drastically different to their standard shiny forms, such as Diglett, whose entire body turns green, which is a heck of a whole lot different from its regular shiny form. There are also other Pokemon with shiny differences as well that are going to be shown on screen, and this is probably one of the most curious entries in this entire video, because as I said, if it is indeed just an error on the part of the developers, it's a really interesting one to make, especially one that would have had to slip by and be approved by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company as well. And due to some of the shinies with more drastic differences, like the Diglett I mentioned earlier, it also seems like maybe they were just giving whatever color they wanted to some of these Pokemon, which just makes this whole situation even more crazy if true. However, these shiny Pokemon are only able to exist within these games, because if I'm not mistaken, if you attempt to transfer one of these shinies from Colosseum or XD to the main series games, they will still be shiny, but they'll end up as their standard shiny color. This is understandable, but also kind of a bummer at the same time, because it would be kind of amazing if there were two different shiny forms in the main series of Pokemon games, but ultimately, these ones will just be relegated, at least for now, to a very interesting and obscure corner of Pokemon history. What do you guys think about all of these different and interesting forms of Pokemon though? Which one of them would you actually like to see for yourself within a main series game? Be sure to let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more if you're new. With that being said, I will be back very soon with another video, and until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.